It's a beautiful day to be alive, everybody. My name is Ian Kanak, and I'm the host of the De-Occulting Yoga podcast. Today is Wednesday morning. What are you guys doing? Don't go take that class with the dude with the man bun, who only took his yoga teacher training to get laid. Come on, everybody, we gotta contribute. Go find a good teacher who isn't gonna put you into some of this mind control BS that we discuss on this podcast. If you guys want to know what we do on this podcast, I discuss yoga consciousness, yoga philosophy, mind control in yoga, natural law, truth, the occult, cults inside of yoga, and how they are formed, plus any other issues that affect the yoga community. I'm not going to be looking at dumb stuff like social media. Like, of course, we'll talk about that, but I'm looking at causal factors. That's the big stuff here. We can talk about all these things like self-love and what is the right type of yoga and acceptance and forgiveness. But at the end of the day, what caused people to be unforgiving? What caused people to be pieces of shit? And you know, why are snobs attracted to yoga? Why is that man bun guy? Why are they at every yoga gym I go to? And when you start talking to them, asking what have they read? What's their purpose here? What's their creative contribution? Other than showing people things they could have learned in an online video and book anyway. The tower starts to fall pretty quickly. You know, it's a castle made of sand. So today I'm going to say the forbidden word. Trivium. 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 I did it, everybody. I said trivium for the first 3 times in yoga history. What? How is that possible? The word trivium is the only reason I'm here right now and you're watching this video. The whole Western thought process in mind has always been built off of the trivium. Well, to quote Thomas Aquinas, who is one of the greatest innovative philosophers ever, even if you don't believe in Christianity like I do, we got to look at these people for progressing and actually helping us get to the point where we understand that, where we can graduate from Christianity. It's quoting Thomas Aquinas. These subjects are known as the trivium and quadrivium because by them, as if by certain roads, the eager mind enters into the secrets of philosophy. So you may be wondering, Ian, what is the trivium? The trivium consists of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. It's a system of learning. It's a thought process. So a quick explanation, just to use me as an example. Okay, let's collect some information right now. I got a handheld microphone. I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt with pink flamingos, a way too long malabi that makes me look like I'm a part of like 3-6 Mafia of the yoga world, arrow of light, a thesaurus and a usage guide, incense burning. So you collected the information. Now you're going to use a logical system, which is step 2, to put that all together. Like, wow, depending on where you're coming from and what your views are, if I've already offended you, then you're going to put that information all together. And then the third aspect, rhetoric, is going to be how you portray that back out to the world, how you express this. If I did piss you off, then you're going to do it in a certain way. Your rhetorical system is going to be, maybe you use cuss words, maybe you'll do these other things. But if you're motivated and you love this video, you're going to be like, wow, Ian. Wow, this Ian guy, he has this De-Occulting Yoga podcast and he's discussing things that no one else is discussing. He's not rehashing the same old, oh, I learned so much in my yoga teacher training. Oh, I didn't learn so much until I met my guru and I taught for 10 years. You know, blah, 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 blah. Why? Okay. I've discussed this before about why are there no creative contributions in yoga? We have this huge system, millions, tens of millions now are doing it. But where is our paradise lost? Where is our no Country for Old Men or Cormac McCarthy biblical inspired book? How about Rumi, who is Islamic? all the South American poets who were inspired by Christianity, which is another system of personal development, right? Comparable to yoga, not as good, but apparently it actually is better because they're actually producing things that are making an influence. They've actually entered into the fields of philosophy and other things, and they have staples. The only reason an Eastern religion and philosophy department exists is because of the same reason an African and Asian and, South American literature department exists, is because they just need to be there. It's not because of popularity, or it's not because Eastern religion is hailed as the king, right? The Western mind has trounced it. In taking from a lot of its same concepts, like Heidegger and Husserl, their philosophy is basically like an evolved Taoism, but it still is evolved. It takes years to learn, and they break it down in such a way that goes against Christianity and other things. But we're not producing any works, everybody. Where are they? Link me to the novels, the poetry, the artwork that's anywhat comparable to what's coming out right now. I actually don't know anybody who's doing that. I see a bunch of people regurgitating the same information and going over the same exact things instead of talking about things like the caste system in yoga and how it still exists, or the Trivium method in yoga and why it's not here. So what goes wrong in yoga is that people hop right to stage 2 or 3 and they miss stage 1. It's as simple as that. When you look at yoga teachers, many enter a teacher training way too fast, and their classes aren't up to par, which is fine, and there's no reason why people can't do that. However, at the same time, why wouldn't you look into the deeper elements? Why wouldn't you collect the grammar instead of hopping in to teaching? And the reason for this is, it's very funny that the 8 limbs of yoga compare with the 7 steps of the Trivium and quadrivium. So, as in yoga, everybody hops immediately to the 3rd limb of yoga, which is asana. Everyone goes straight there, which in a few minutes I'll compare it all. I'll make a deeper comparison to that of rhetoric, right? How yogis hop right into rhetoric, which is the expression of their body. They forget about the yamas and the niyamas and breeze right past that. And then their foundations are off. Then they're entering yoga for the wrong reason. That's when you get the guy with the man bun who's just trying to get laid, or the chick who's on social media trying to get rich or attention, and all the other archetypes that we see. And that's cool. You got to get your hustle on. I love that. I like to see that because that means that there's work to do and it's easy to identify. And I can call it out, right? I'm a new archetype of the kid who has the information and is trying to, I don't want to say liberate in a sense, because it's funny that in the Republic, Plato says that the excessive desire for freedom leads to slavery, right? And in the yoga world, that's all we hear, oh, you got to be free. Our emotions are going to be free. We have to think for ourselves and be ourselves. And this is for you. This is about you and yourself. But yoga has entered a world where we have jumped out of the frying pan of subjection to free yogis into the fire of subjection to slaves, and exchanged their excessive and untimely freedom for the harshest and bitterest of servitudes, where the slave is the master. When we don't have the grammar, then we're screwed. That's why there's all of these problems in yoga. That's why there's cults. That's why there's gurus. That's why there's so much emphasis on social media and crap that doesn't really matter. Because people haven't learned. And the forming elements of not just yoga but of life, of the social sciences. Cicero, or Cicero, and if you want to say it in Latin, said, Cicero was an orator in Caesar's time, very famous, wrote a bunch of texts, probably one of the most famous of all time. Quote, "The ideal orator will be a man of encyclopedic knowledge because learning precedes eloquence, and because he will be the type of the perfect citizen. He will be eloquent about everything which concerns corporate life, but eloquence implies great tact, a sense of propriety of word and thing as befits each contingency." So what Cicero is saying is that an encyclopedic knowledge is needed to have elegance, to be able to look at every single angle of the problem. It's easy to hop into yoga and not see the cults and not see the occult, everything that this podcast is about, everything that I'm going to go over. And when you don't have a view of history or psychology or sociology, when you haven't read about Jonestown or Charles Manson, studied religions deeply in a very critical way, and weren't making like comparisons like, this is my faith, I just want to study this. Like, when you have, in a sense, no religion except believing in God, then you can look at all this critically and be like, okay, what's good and what's bad about all this, right? I know that because I've been in religious studies programs and philosophy programs, English programs. A lot of people in there are, like I said, just trying to justify their religion, and they'll use the excuse like, oh, well, I know all about yoga, or I know all about Hinduism or Buddhism or Islam. However, they enter that just looking to get more information, to give them an excuse not to like confront what they're believing in, which is cool, and you can believe in what you want to. That shouldn't be the reason you enter in, though. And we've been put into this world where it's like you could do this 1 month yoga immersion and 200 hours, and it's like, to get a teacher certificate, and it's 200 hours. That's nothing. I'd put 200 hours in a month on yoga, every month. I've done that for years now, but that's nothing. There's so many more people who are much more knowledgeable than me. I'm like still a Padawan. I feel uncomfortable in a sense. I don't feel uncomfortable teaching people, but marketing myself as this, you know what I mean? Like the rainbow, it's the rainbow kid who's got the pot of gold for you, is not what I'm trying to do. Everyone who's trying to do that, I would say, hasn't looked into all the elements, because when you look into yamas and niyamas and live by them, you're not going to care about that. You're not going to care what other people think, how they view you, or monetary success. That doesn't mean money's bad or you can't have monetary success, but that's not going to be an issue. The trouble with a cheap, specialized education is that you never stop paying for it. Let me repeat that. The trouble with a cheap, specialized education is that you never stop paying for it. Yoga and yogis in the yoga world, because of the profit system, there's no profit off of the yamas and niyamas and meditation and pranayama or dhyana or dhanarana or samadhi. Those equal about $0. Of course you can make, I'm sure, some money, but that's not the issue. That's not what the focus is on. And so what happens is, in the grammar stage, you state the definitions. If I say the word yoga, right, I have to provide a definition if we're going to be getting into it very deeply, so you understand what I'm talking about. Or if I say constitution or law, it'd be best, usually define terms in debate and in the courtroom, because those who control the definitions who dictates the definition gets to decide everything that flows out of that. The people who are pushing asana on us and defining in terms of what yoga is now with asana, they're using the Trivium. They're gathering all the information about us. They're gathering psychological and sociological and all this other stuff so that they can use advertisements and mass marketing tactics to rope us in so that they can make money. Well, we're stuck off in la la land in the whole everyone is one, no judgment, no comparison, which is cool, but that's not going to get you anywhere. It's when you're interacting with someone and they're your friend or you're not, just a normal conversation, yes, you shouldn't judge them, you shouldn't compare, you shouldn't accuse them of anything or make them feel bad. That's great. Nonviolent communication, read the book, good stuff. But nonviolent communication isn't a very good thought process to see if you're in a cult or if something has gone terribly wrong with your thinking. I'll read that again. Who dictates the definitions get to decide everything that flows out of it. So our definition of yoga has been changed. They try to define yoga first through asana and pranayama or the bliss of meditation, like, oh, I meditate. Once you meditate, you'll have, you can do anything. Or they'll talk about, oh, I have the best breathing exercises ever. You haven't done my breathing exercises. I know some kid who calls himself a junior god because how he feels when he does pranayama, but he's never even done yoga in his life. He just is out there like literally destroying his brain right now, being a little goofball, and then he's going to start teaching other people this stuff, and it's crazy, right? Or they just, the whole social media, asana photo conglomerate, just that's what they're putting our definition of yoga as. And so then when we say yoga, or then when I enter into this field I'm entering right now and saying that there's mind control in yoga, our definition of yoga is different. They're like, how can there be mind control when we're just doing poses? That's the mind control. Okay. So there's a few different, if anyone's never heard of the word determinism, that means like everything's already been set into motion. Right? There's like, there's things like that life has a purpose and that we have free will. Or there's determinism. So, I'm going to read a quote on determinism right now. Determinism is the result of the behavior of those who are determined to ignore what is happening around them. Recognition of the psychic and social consequences of technological change make it possible to neutralize the effects of innovation. If we maintain lively dialogue with and among the technologies, we can enlist them on the side of traditional values instead of watching those values disappear while we play the helpless bystanders. That was quote by Marshall McLuhan. So let's break that down sentence by sentence. Determinism is the result of the behavior of those who are determined to ignore what is happening around them. So people who aren't using the Trivium method, right? They are victims of determinism. They haven't established what is going on around them. They have no knowledge of the psychic and sociological consequences of technological change. Right, which I'm getting in the next sentence, which make it possible to neutralize the effects of innovation. If we don't recognize what this all means, if we don't know what the nuclear bomb is going to do, then we'll never be able to neutralize it. If we don't know that other countries get it, North Korea may get it one day, then we may be caught off guard. Same with people who just go with the flow and think everything is already determined and everything already has a purpose. And there's no reason to look deeper into things because everything's just going to happen. Which is one of these new age lies and lies in yoga that we always hear. Just let it happen. Everything happens for a reason. I believe that it's both. I believe the universe gives us doors and opportunities and we have options to choose. It's not set in stone like what we're going to do. The grammar stage really helps with that. The reason that the definition of yoga is so weak right now, and it's just been reduced to like sexuality on the beach, and videos of people in Jeeps and yoga retreats where, like I said, it's the regurgitation of things. And yes, it helps people, but what about the world, people? What about being a karmic yogi and having a worldview that we can actually change the world, not just change ourselves and change whoever else wants to come do some backbends with us? No, there has to be a reason behind all this, because everyone, and there is a reason, and that's what I'm saying. The reason, what gets put in our head is, don't judge people, don't care about these things, love everybody. There is no justice, right? It's not their fault. But as I discussed on episode number 1, that's solipsism. That's the biggest lie in the world. That's what the oppressors want. That's the best thing that you could ask for, is that everyone's going to say that. That the best personal development system in the world, everyone just sits on the side and just is like, oh, it doesn't matter. Are you kidding me? People aren't guilty? Everyone that made our bodies all crippled and gave us these bad foods, and all the people who run the slaughterhouses, they don't deserve the worst thing in the world? And I'm not saying they need to have violence, but they're not. They should be shamed. We should tell these people, and they should never. They did this to us, and we think that, like, oh, the best way to do this is to just stop doing it, not care about it, and just talk about it. But the causal factors don't matter, right? And that's so wrong. And these weak definitions come from weak questions. Yogis are just seeking answers, which is a part of the logical and rhetorical stage of yoga. A question comes from the grammar stage. You collect all this information and you're like, why does nobody in yoga release any crazy creative works or like political charged works? I keep saying creative, but political or sociological works. Why does no one do that? Then your logical brain takes over. Then your logical brain does its thing, and then you can use whatever system that you want, like induction or deduction. There's so many. Psychoanalytical. You pick whatever school you want, and then suddenly you have an answer that you speak out to the world with your rhetorical, with your rhetoric, So when the questions are like, how do I get more followers on Instagram? How do I do a better backbend? How do I find a relationship partner in yoga? How do I, like, these are the questions people ask. How do I be happy? How do I find bliss? Like, that's cool, but you should know how to be happy. You don't need yoga to do that. It's so easy to be happy. Quit your crappy job and relationship, go in nature, eat good food, hang out with cool people, and do hobbies that you like. If that's not enough, then you got problems. Then it's time to go to real therapy, right? And if you don't have the courage to take that path, then go find courage. Get over your fear. There's processes, there's levels to the game, right? That don't involve yoga. Yes, yoga is like very good at those things. It can help you a lot. But yoga's purpose is bigger than that. Much bigger than that. Why are we clearing our body? Why are we opening our body, minds, chakras, nadis? Just for fun? Just to feel cool? Just to have like a drug-like experience? And the answer is yes and no. But see, I'm asking these questions, and the answers that you get out of this are much better. Even if you don't agree with what I'm saying or like my viewpoint, if you ask questions like that, and then you employ grammar and you read a lot across the whole board, then you'll be elevated. You'll be raised. That's why it's called raising children. Think about the word. We're raising children. Raising doesn't happen automatically. A lot of people never got raised. And raised happens through reading books. Like point blank. Or, listening to audiobooks or taking courses in a school where you read books. Or you learn hear a lecture from someone who's read thousands of books, right? So let's hop into this system though. So they ruin the definitions, and we start to forget the yamas and niyamas, which are the grammar. So let's start with grammar. That's what like the big thing that's missing. Then we'll hop into niyamas. Then we'll hop into the crazy stuff, the quadrivium, algebra, geometry, music, and cosmology, and how those tie into all this, and how those are being corrupted. This is exciting stuff, everybody. I really love to talk about this. This Trivium stuff changed my life. Like, read so many books on all this. So, and I'm so glad I can like put you, and like I'm so glad I found this comparison with the 7 limbs of yoga. It's like kind of trippy. It's really trippy. So, the 5 levels of the 5 yamas are ahisma, nonviolence; satya, truthfulness; asteya, non-stealing; brahmacharya, non-excess; and aparigaraha, non-possessiveness, non-greed. So let's go one by one. Non-violence. So people take this as like don't eat meat, and we can talk about that another time. But ahisma just means not stealing, mostly from yourself, not hurting yourself first and foremost. That's the most important part of that. That you don't want to. When you take from yourself, then that's the worst thing that you can do. When you don't employ a system where you get to know everything, where you collect everything that you can so that you can make the best decision for your life, then you're hurting yourself. Skipping this step is literally a form of violence because you're entering in a system where you don't have the information and your mind automatically has to make a logical decision, and then you put rhetoric on it. If I ask you something and I told you have to answer this question you don't know, you just make something up. Your logical mind will pick the best possible answer, and then you use rhetoric to put it out there. So that one's very important and very like telling. So next one is satya, which is truthfulness, which is, lo and behold, of course, being truthful about what you've learned, right? All these, you're truthful, right? If you learn something that defies your logic and your belief system, that you have to stand by that. If you believe that doing kapotasana every morning after 5 poses is good for your back, and someone like shows you science is like, no man, you're really hurting yourself, which I think is true, then if you don't change that, and if you don't gather maybe some more information and say, okay, well, I'm going to see how I feel if I don't do this, and I'm going to ask some other yoga teachers, then you're not being truthful with yourself and you're violating the yamas. Third is asteya, which is non-stealing. Once again, this comes back to the non-violence thing, but it's also like when you don't have grammar and you're not being honest when you try to sell something to someone. If you just are like being a quack, a quack academic or a quack yoga teacher, you're stealing from people in a sense. If you haven't, it doesn't matter if you're flexible or not flexible or good or bad, but if you're presenting something that you're not, then that's stealing. When, and people don't want to be honest. People don't want to say like, hey, I'm a yoga teacher, but I've only read like 5 yoga books or 10 like really easy yoga books. They don't want to, and that's cool, but like putting that out there and being upfront with people and saying I'm learning right now would totally be fine and totally not be like stealing. But when you try to act like the shit, that's stealing from people 100%, because they'll learn eventually. If they get raised by their grammar, they'll be like, oh man, this person sucks. I've learned that. I've had many experiences like that where these teachers put themselves up on this pedestal. It's crazy. So fourth is brahmacharya, non-excess, which people usually think of celibacy, like sexual celibacy, when they hear this. But it's not that. It's about the saving of energy. This is so important because you save energy when you're right or you have a knowledge. When you're wrong and you don't have the baseline, your logical mind just goes on and on and on forever. Literally, like, have you ever told a lie to someone or done something and like just spoken when you didn't really know what was going on? Your mind like keeps thinking about it forever. Like, is someone going to call me out? I wasn't right. Like, actually gathering in the information is so much more easier and so much more beneficial in the long run. We literally give away our energy when we do that. So number 5 is aparigaraha, which is non-possessiveness and non-greed, we're very greedy about our ideas. The hardest thing for a human to do is admit they were wrong, especially about some belief. Like when people give up Christianity, or I like to graduate from Christianity, they go through a crazy process, right? They lose their friends, they might lose some family members who don't look at them the same. They go get tattoos and go get drunk, and that's sometimes, but I've seen that living in Utah and other places that like when it's given up, people kind of go off the deep end and realize that they're just reacting. They're reacting instead of like thinking through it. So a possessiveness on these ideas, like in yoga, is crazy, right? Like gurus are so crazy about their ideas and like possess them so much. Like, no, you don't know the pranayama. You go nadi shodhana 9 times, but you don't do the kumbhaka, the inhale and the external exhale. You don't do that. My master said, if you do that, you're an untamed tiger. They pull that shit on people. I've seen it. Or I've seen American teachers like, going to a teacher is the most important thing. I studied with C. Krayas Patabi Joyce for 18 years, and it was the greatest decision I made. But maybe when you say like, hey bro, why do you have to get a hip replacement? Why'd you get that hip replacement? Or oppose their guru in some way, or like mention something. They'll just like go right off, like not look at the grammar and go right off into la la land. Which once again is not conducive in the long run. That wasn't a diss on teachers like that or Patabi Joyce. I do Ashtanga yoga. But that's what I see people doing. I'm not going to do Ashtanga yoga for the rest of my life. I might not even do it for 6 more months. I think it's a cool little system, but Simon Borg-Olivier's system is so much more fun. There's so many more people who have, or Matthew Sweeney's moon sequences. There's so many more things, so many systems I like more than that, and I play around with. And one day I'll evolve from those too and make up my own systems and learn other ones. When people have this dogmatic possessiveness, that's not in line with the yama and not in line with a good grammar base. So let's hop on to the niyamas now, because this is also something else I think is important, because a lot of people also don't have like a logical way to look at things. They never took, just once again, they never had the grammar to like help them. They never saw all the different sides. They never read Aquinas and Augustine and Nietzsche and Bertrand Russell, and just got like a general, it's like, you don't need to read them specifically, but it's good to know what like some of the ideas of like Spinoza and Voltaire and Sir Francis Bacon are, right? Like just a general like, okay, Descartes believed that. Or even in yoga, like Lao Tzu believed this, Cheng Tzu believed this, Kalidasa said this, Rumi said that, right? It goes on and on. Confucius said this. It's so important to be able to use that in your logical sequence and see how they approach problems. The only way you can do that is through reading. Like, it's awesome. Like, that's the cool thing about Eastern stories. There's always like some story where you see how they logically like break everything down. There's almost like no grammar. You don't hear about like how they did it. It kind of starts at step 2, which is cool because I'm pretty sure they did have the grammar because they wrote books and like became figures. So step 2, logic and the niyamas. So the 5 niyamas, I won't read them off this time. We'll just go one at a time. Is satya, which is purity. So is there a purity to your logic? Is there an ulterior motive that's behind all this? When you enter into this problem, when you enter into yoga, are you pure? Are you living this life where you're a good person? Like, when people are a dark worker or evil, they use the trivium also. But that's what defines the trivium from yoga. And the thing about evil, though, is that they're pure in their thought, too. Even though it's not like your definition of pure, they're not in the middle. They're not muddled. They know what they want. Their thoughts, emotions, and feelings are lined up, and action are lined up, and they're going for the goal. So they are pure in their thought. And getting stuck in the middle is the worst thing that you can do. Make a decision and live by it, right? So number 2, santosha, which is contentment. So this is important when you enter into just academics and looking at your worldview in general, is that you need to understand that what you got in the grammar phase is all you have. What you know is what you know. And be okay with that. Understand that maybe you're not the smartest crayon, the brightest crayon in the box or whatever at this moment. And chill with that. Don't don't overstep your boundaries. Don't act like you have grammar that you don't have. Don't, in yoga, do a pose that you can't do. Or pranayama or meditation that you can't do. Right? That's going to lead to trouble. Contentment with who you are and yourself is so important in both of these things. It's so crazy how these line up and how much deeper you can look at the Trivium method when you add the yamas and niyamas and everything. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink real fast. Third is the tapas, which is self-discipline, training your senses. Of course, this is very important in the sense of logic because you have to have your emotions under control. You can't be going out there if you're trying to make an argument or trying to help someone. You can't be like, bro, check out the De-Occulting Yoga podcast. He has it all. He's breaking down all yoga. What you're doing is wrong. That shit is not right, bro. If you just that's not going to work. And people are like that though. And the majority of people, when they start to make arguments or not get their way, start to get into that type of argument. And that's what's great about yoga, is that can actually teach you a lot of self-discipline and a lot of emotional control that you can use in more academic or personal ways, right? But learning through academics though, and controlling your mind when you get a new revelation that doesn't agree with your old belief system, can help you in yoga too. When you're in that class and there's that person next to you that's going hard and looking at you and getting you a little bit angry, and you're like, I slept 3 hours, I don't feel good, I ate French fries last night, I do not want to push myself right now, I'm just here to be here. The maturity to do that can also come from being academically disciplined. I noticed that in jiu-jitsu. I did jiu-jitsu for years, and I don't want to say I'm the smartest guy in the room, but actually all the smartest guys in the room never were angry. There was doctors and other people way smarter than me, but people who were educated never got angry, never was hitting shit and screaming. It's it was only the uneducated people for whatever reason. And people who are actually very disciplined in jiu-jitsu, they were actually pretty open-minded when I told them other things. It's kind of that two-way road I'm talking about. Step 4 is savadhyaya. Savadhyaya. Excuse the mispronunciation. Anyway, that is self-study, inner exploration. Wow, when we're looking at logic, it's like I said, there's so many different ways for a logical system. I do literary criticism in school, which is where you take a certain viewpoint on something and run with it, right? I might take a Marxist critique of Albert Camus' The Stranger, or I might take a libertarian view of that, or of any book, or a Christian, Islamic, whatever type of view, right? So as you do that, or any sociological view, there's anything, or a view of yoga, right? You might take an 8-limb yoga Ashtanga viewpoint, or a karmic yoga viewpoint of a certain anything, any set of information, right? So that leads to self-study, right? And inner exploration when you do that, because you'll find different things you've never seen before. When you have this problem, you've gathered some grammar, you're trying to logically get together. In yoga, we can apply this to yoga pose. You gather the information about trying to get your Kapotasana. You've done it a bunch, you got teachers, you watch a bunch of videos. But then when you're looking at it, you could say, well, I can do what Kino said. I can do a more contortionist viewpoint, or a viewpoint that utilizes the bandhas, or I can just force it. And that's the logical aspect. Then the rhetorics when you perform the pose, right? So inner exploration is a beautiful thing that, once again, is missed in yoga. A lot of this stuff is missed in yoga. A lot of people aren't content. That's why they're posting on social media. There's so much possessiveness, and there's not truthfulness, and the purity doesn't happen because people don't want to be karmic yogis or ashtanga yogis, which are light workers and dark workers. No one wants to get into this self-study, correct? Because you're going to have to go down the rabbit hole and ask some questions, which are going to produce some answers that may not make you too happy. So 5 is Ishvara Pradhyahana, surrender, and in parentheses, to God. So at some point in the logical spectrum, what I do is I put the question out there, I think about it, but then I let go. I surrender. And then the answer comes to me, which turns into my rhetoric. Same with the anasana. You sit there, you put it all together, you say you're going to do it, but at some point you just got to let go. You're not thinking about those things when you actually enter into the pose. You're surrendering to the pose. You're just, whoop, right? It's so amazing to see how these connect. And people don't want to surrender. People don't want to let go. They want to push. But at some point, like I know a lot of people in academics, I'm like, hey man, if you don't know now, just explore some things that are just totally random. Go take a walk. Go do things you want to do. Go ice skating. Read a book on ancient Chinese history and you may figure out that math problem. That's the difference between the diffuse portion of the brain and the active side of the brain. Which, the diffuse part's where you're like reading a book or doing things and you work hard, and that's like when your brain's active. They're two different sides and two different modes. So we just covered the first 2 steps. So what's the third step? Also, I have all this laid out. I'm going to go over all 7 of these steps in detail in articles and videos on SavvyZen.com. So check that out. I should have mentioned that at the start of the video, but if you made it to this point, I'm going to go into this with quotes and a lot of other stuff. So number 3 is rhetoric. That's how we accentuate. That's how we talk. Like up there, I was talking about Kikero and about the ideal orator, right? When the new reality is in the image and not behind it. The potency of rhetoric is in creating its own vision of truth. That's what's happened in our society. And I talked about this on episode 2, Hyperreal and the Postmodern Yoga Condition, is that our rhetoric now has turned into this image. And it's like there's always been like a reality behind the image, right? But I've talked about how we're at some level where we have simulacras of simulacras of simulacras of simulacras. So the new reality for the people who aren't using the Trivium method is this image, is this the pose, right? They don't understand that there was 2 other steps before that. They just see the look. That's a problem because it's made by the shaping imagination, which has problems. The imagination is so crazy. I'm a writer, I'm a novelist, I'm a poet. It's so haywire up there when I'm doing my thing. I have no idea what's coming out. It's very logical, but it isn't, right? So when we see this though, that's what the potency of rhetoric is that we get to create truth suddenly. We get to, as we're speaking, it starts to manifest. Same with like the yoga. This is like the first image. Like the yamas and niyamas are very, you can't really see them. You can see them how you live and stuff, but doing asana is like seeing like how, what you've done in those areas. And I know like there's contortionists who can do these things, but if you're following the path, like, and doing them step by step, that's what starts to happen. If you're starting, and that's like your vision of truth, that's like your image, right? That's your reality. Same with when you create a statement, right? When you start to say it, then that's everything you've assembled. When the whole point though is to just post a photo to get more followers or to do other things, there's no higher purpose in the end, then it's just an image. And there's no reality behind it. The reality is gone. Same when people just say these things or they teach these yoga classes for no higher purpose. That's just, it's been turned into a symbol the symbol of doing yoga. It's not an actual reality anymore, which may be a crazy concept to look into, but I'd recommend Simulacra and Simulation and a few other books by Jean Baudrillard, however you want to say that. So asana is when we start to put the rhetoric in motion. Where our body is who we are. Right now I'm in my room sitting like this, and my posture is like this, and that's going to determine how my body feels and what I put in my body and who I was around and how they incited certain emotions and what the sunlight did to me. All starts with where I was at and how I was positioned. So when we do yoga, we put ourselves in these positions that are crazy to other people. Our rhetoric is so far off from other people, and that's why we're kind of a crazy bunch. That's why I'm wearing a shirt with a pink flamingo on it. And I wear this places that I maybe shouldn't wear it too. Like, formal things at my university program where people are wearing 3-piece suits. And here I am with my mala beads, and I practice yoga before the event with my shirt on right outside of the event. I'm in headstand. That's a funny story, a little quip. The other day, like 2 weeks ago, there was this, this Black Mountain Institute event. I didn't think it was in this building. I thought it was in this other building. So I'm doing yoga and across the campus so no one sees me. But it's in this building. So I'm in a headstand. I'd say I set the alarm for 5 minutes. So I'm going to do a meditation. I want to have a little bit better visualization powers. It's in this building I'm right in front of in this grassy area. And everyone knows who I am. So here I am. I'm like wearing my little short running shorts. It's kind of cold. It's not cold, but it's nighttime. I'm in a headstand and people are like outside loitering. And after like minute 3.5, I get a glimpse of some people. I'm like, oh shit. And I don't want to come down, so I do it. And then I get into the event. I'm getting some weird looks, right? I just thought that was a little bit funny. So that's what this is. And rhetoric is a skill in and of itself, which builds off of the first two, though. Same with, if those two are flawed, then your rhetoric's not going to be right. You're going to have ulterior motives. You're going to want to do asana for this, and this reason, but not for the liberation of yourself so that you can liberate others and help others. Or just to liberate yourself if you're an Ashtanga yogi or a dark worker. And not Ashtanga yogi in Batabi Joyce's system, but just someone who follows the 8 limbs of yoga for themselves. So now we're getting into something called the quadrivium. The trivium was the first 3, and the quadrivium is a 4-step system, quad, right? Which is algebra, geometry, music, and astronomy-cosmology. So lo and behold, it connects with the 8 limbs of yoga, right? So the 4th limb of yoga is pranayama. And the thing about pranayama is that it's a science. Asana is very subjective, but pranayama is very scientific. There's a certain effect on the brain that it has to basically everyone. There's not that much subjectivity. That's why there's so many problems and so much brain damage and so many warnings about pranayama. And that's why people like Wim Hof kind of piss me off, because people are doing this stuff and not realizing they're giving themselves brain damage. They don't realize what's going on. Come on, people! But at the same time, it's because they didn't have the first 3 steps ready. They didn't put themselves in the right place. They didn't have a cleansed body, and they didn't have the morals, right? But anyway, so pranayama connects with algebra, because algebra is the crudest form of mathematical science, right? It's just basically addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It's basically the mathematics that make up the systems of our world, right? And that's what pranayama fixes, is the systems of our body. It heals systems in our body, like our brain. It purifies the body. We haven't reached ethereal senses. Yes, it raises kundalini, but that's it's very systematic. It's think about what I'm saying. Systematic, system, bodily system, right? That's what we start to get into with pranayama, the mathematics of it all and the science aspect. So step 5 is geometry. And the yoga limb that corresponds with that is pratyahara. So it's funny that pratyahara is with pratyahara, is the withdrawal of the senses. Like that's in yoga when you kind of become an aesthetic. I'm sorry. We're the people who like starve themselves and stuff like that. And you don't have to do that, but you learn how to like live without the senses, right? So that connects with geometry because it affects our senses. When we look into the world and see everything around us, there's angles everywhere. There's right angles all in this room right now. It's all around us. And that affects our senses. The geometry of all these buildings, all these things, does have an effect on us. So when we look into yoga, that's what pratyahara does. It breaks down the angles and the buildings and creations we've built inside of our mind and our body. I'm sorry it took me so long to get to that. My thing went down for a second and it was loading, so I was kind of just, going off the top right there. So pratyahara breaks down the geometry of our mind by withdrawing the senses which create our experience, which create our reality, which our sight shows me these angles. My hearing is literally mathematical, which I'll get into in the next limb of yoga. It's crazy, right? So that one is, I think, the coolest one to think about because it's like, wow. When we get into this, it connects so well to geometry because when you're doing geometry, you start to see like how everything is built. You like literally break down the whole world. You get into things like geomancy, which is where you start to control like the angles and how it affects you. That's a pretty cool thing I'll be talking about another time is like the angles like of angles in cities and stuff and how they affect us, which is called geomancy. But when you start to break those down and look at that, then it's like you don't have any senses anymore. The senses get removed when you do geometry. The senses also get removed when you take this step in the Trivium method of geometry, and like I said, everything starts to go away. Then you understand that the senses are just the senses. Same in yoga. When we do pratyahara and we master it, we just realize that this is all our creation. And yes, that's not solipsism. That without sight, I wouldn't have these things. These things would still be here, yes. But I'm the one who's doing that. And I'm the one influencing that. So if I can purify my senses, then everything else will appear to be different. And that will get me ready for dharana, which is the sixth limb of yoga, which is concentration and cultivating inner perceptual awareness. So when we do dharana, that's yogic meditation. There's objectiveless samadhi and objective samadhi. This is objective type of samadhi. So the problem with the whole yoga community and the New Age community in general is they just tell us to like meditate and to just let your mind go. But when you don't have these first 6 steps ready, then you're just going to think of thoughts, and that's actually going to imprint you more, and you're going to get rid of them and they're going to come back. And you're just like literally imprinting your thoughts. You have no control over anything, and you're just rethinking the same crappy things. If you don't have your morals, body, and breath right, you're going to be having impure thoughts and bodily pains, and you're just going to be dwelling on that. And that's not cool. That's not going to help anybody. That's why people who do that type of meditation don't end up actually like doing very much. Truthfully though, I know a lot of people who've been doing that for years, and it's like they're still like haven't evolved yet. But yogic meditation is where the visualization happens, where we see Sushumna coming up the body and the spine, and we then add chakras and start to see which way they turn and make sure the lotus flowers are up, and then eventually open the crown of our head. So when we do that, we have a one-pointed focus. We need everything else so that we can have a one-pointed focus, which is the mathematics of creation. When we have a one-pointed focus, that is the mathematics of creation, which is music. Music is all mathematics, mathematical harmonies and melodies, right? Like all the octaves are mathematical and known in the brain already, which is so nuts, right? But when we do dharana, or yoga meditation, we're literally creating like mathematical angles in the brain and holding them, which is so crazy once again how this connects. That's so important for us to do, right? On our path, to be able to see things and hold them in our brain, because when we do, we forget about everything else. We forget about our past conditioning, and then we imprint something new, which is so important for us. So moving on, we got dhyana, which is devotion, meditation on the divine, which is basically just like what you hear about, just meditation without trying to think of anything. And that only can be accomplished when you actually don't think of anything. It's not like getting minds in your thoughts in your brain and removing them. That's like when you've been able to concentrate so deeply, you start to meditate on the divine and on nothingness in a sense, or God, and nothing's coming in. So that is connected in the quadrivium, which is the last step. We're not going to go into samadhi in this episode, with astronomy and cosmology. And that is the endless bliss of life. That's the endless space, the endless universe. When we connect with God and we devote ourselves, and that kind of gets into samadhi in a sense with the unification. When we enter into that space realm, and we like get into that endless energy, and when you tap into that, then we enter into the divine. Then we actually, there is the 8-limit yoga in the quadrivium and trivium, because we ascend those things. The quadrivium and trivium don't matter when we enter into samadhi. We've transcended all of that, all these things, because none of it matters anymore. If you do both, if you master the trivium and quadrivium and yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga, that's the ultimate mastery. That is enlightenment, 100%. And I'm very sad that this hasn't been included in our society, because, like I said, the people who put the advertisements in our society, who run Nike, who run World Star Hip Hop, and everything else that's like making our society kind of weird right now, they use the Trivium method. They look at us, they analyze us, they logically put it together with the smartest people in the world. Then the rhetoric is us getting it out there. Then they use the statistics. They use all this other, the quadrivium too. So not utilizing that and applying it to your yoga practice is very dangerous. And it's how we're getting controlled. Without the trivium and not thinking about these problems, like, why am I doing this sequence? Why is this yoga teacher good? And making some judgments and making some comparisons in a non-violent way, and just like a way that says, hey, it doesn't matter what the outcome is. I'm just making sure I do this the right way, instead of blindly going into something from just a feeling, Then we can evolve. Then our species, the yoga, the genus of yoga, can evolve, and we can like step into something new, which is what I talked about in the Hyper Real episode, about getting out of logocentrism, which places rhetoric at the highest level, which is crazy, which places grammar and stuff at a worse level, because, So thank you for listening, everybody. Check this stuff out. I have show notes in the link. I'll provide some cool books to check out on all this stuff, and maybe some podcasts on the Trivium. I actually will provide another podcast just on the Trivium by a guy named Mark Passio. They'll get into it. They'll talk about it. Check that out. Start applying this to your life. It really does help. When you're really trying to solve deep problems, you got just go back to this method and you'll solve anything. Nothing has been more life-changing for me than yoga and the Trivium method. Combining together is one of the coolest things I've done. There's going to be 7 different articles on the website with videos and just text, blog posts, talking about this and maybe going into a little bit more detail. So, this is Ian from Savvy Zen. I'll see you guys next week on the De-Occulting Yoga podcast. We're getting into the deep shit next week. We're going to make some people mad. It's going to be karmic yogis, light workers, versus Ashtanga yogis, dark workers. I'll see you guys next time. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.